Let's make history. The northeast corner of Queens is a neighborhood known as Little Neck. It sits right on the border. Once you keep going east, at some point you'll be, once you're out of Little Neck, you would be in Long Island. And that's Great Neck. Little Neck was a much larger area than it is today. To distinguish between the two, they called the area Great Neck. The Long Island portion, they called that Great Neck, but originally that was Little Neck as well. And Little Neck got its name partially from the Matinacock Native Americans, who were the original settlers of that area, going back to antiquity before the Europeans, particularly the Dutch, arriving in the early 1600s. And they called the area Madnen, and the Dutch called it Little Madnen's Neck. And after a while, the Madnen part was dropped and it just became Little Neck. And so the area west of Marathon Parkway changed hands several times. Originally, it was the Hicks family. Then it went from the Hicks to the Wicks to the Van Zants, then to George Douglas, then to the Douglas family. William Douglas got it next, so forth and so on. And that's where Douglaston got its name. And the Matinacock Native Americans had a thriving fishing industry there. Was thriving for many years. When the Dutch arrived, they continued that going, so they got sustenance from that, as well as a dock. There was a dock constructed there along Little Neck. Because of its position, because of its geological position, where it was situated along the water in Long Island Sound, which is basically that strip of water between northern Long Island and Connecticut. That's called Long Island Sound. It's kind of where the East River meets with the Atlantic Ocean. So the clams have a different taste. And this is where the name Little Neck clams come from. Little Neck clams get their name from the neighborhood of Little Neck, which at the time was a village. The Dutch built these sophisticated, complex farming systems, and they would sell all sorts of fruit they produced to Manhattan, to be sold into Manhattan. And these elements are what shaped Little Neck as a community. In the evolution of New York City during the 1800s and early 20th century, real estate developers began to seek out many of those far-off corners on the edges of the city, of the outer boroughs, to capitalize on New York City's fast-paced growth. And so Little Neck was one of those communities. A lot of the people and families who owned these farms there began to sell them off. Little Neck began to be more suburbanized. And the area of Douglaston, originally, that was like considered quote unquote greater Little Neck, or somewhat of a downtown area, so to speak, of Little Neck. That area got its own distinct identity. A lot of artists would congregate there. Little Neck, on the other hand, or what is Little Neck today, was developed more into like a quaint, suburban, quiet community, more family oriented. Little Neck today is mostly Chinese and other Far East Asian groups. It's an upper middle class neighborhood.